Welcome to the No Filter, No Apologies podcast with Rebecca Sachs and Katy Shapiro.
Hey, so today we're going to talk about things that happen to women. They don't even realize it happens to them until they're tired and burn out. It's because you're good at your job. You take on additional responsibilities. You fix things. You're that go-to person that helps the business in general or the people around you.
But then it keeps you stuck.
Yes.
And I think I've seen it in a number of different scenarios, right? As Rebecca and I were preparing for this episode, we were talking about our two different styles of taking on more work or things that you're not supposed to take on. For me, it's the excitement of learning things, or I have the capacity to get it done quickly. So I'll be like, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And before I know it, I'm working on a ton of things that have nothing to do with my particular job. And yes, I'm getting recognized and people see my skill set, but when it comes time to look at the measurable impact I was supposed to have in my particular role, I was losing time that I could dedicate to that. And also I was burning out, and that wasn't really a healthy way to do that. So I think that was my approach to taking on more work. What was yours?
It was just depending on the situation, but a lot of it was I was good at what I was doing. And so people would just, if there was something within that wheelhouse, here, do this. I've also been guilty of taking on things knowing that I'm going to do it better than somebody else and overextending myself on my own, right? It all ends up being our own faults, right? But it was me, the one that was initiating it more so than somebody just dumping things on me. Although I've had that happen where people have dumped things on me or like, oh, you can work on this, you can work on that. Okay.
Well, I think what happens is that once people realize one of two things. Once they realize you're either capable, or two, they realize you're willing, then they just start to assume and put things onto you.
Yeah.
And I think depending on your response, because I think there are women on all sides of the spectrum, right? Yeah. My side is, oh, I'm excited. Yeah, give me that. I'll take that. I'm super excited. Yours is, I can get that done. I can get it done faster, quicker, probably better. So yeah, definitely give it to me. I think there are some other people who are like, oh, I can get that done just because they have a helper personality and they want to support. And I think there are some people that are on the spectrum of being just a people pleaser who doesn't want to let anybody down. And so they don't speak up or advocate for themselves and say, yeah, I can do that. I'll take it on. Right. Even though now they're working until they're burning the midnight oil, if you will, to get that done because they really didn't have the capacity. Can you think of just a blatantly obvious time where you took on something that you had no business taking on, and sort of tell us why?
Yeah. I want to say post-COVID, but it wasn't post-COVID. It was in COVID. Okay. And so initially talent acquisition were the shiny, happy people that bring people into the organization, help meet someone's career dreams, goals, get them into the job that they've been dreaming of for years. And on the flip side, we're responsible for distributing separation agreements through an automated system to the people that were being laid off. So go from being on the front end of the process to now the not so happy end of the process.
So the recruiting team, who's usually responsible for bringing people in, is now part of the exit process for a group of employees?
Correct. Well, we didn't have interaction with those employees that were being separated. We were the ones that were sending out the agreements, and if they had questions, it would come through to us that we would then filter.
So you were managing the tech process of that. So you were even, not only were you helping on a back end of something, but you were also managing the tech piece of it too.
Yeah.
Wow. And was there a moment you were like, what are we doing? How did we get here?
I think throughout the entire thing, our whole team was very puzzled by it.
Okay.
But I mean, on the flip side, it speaks to how great we were, right? And we talk about it a lot that women are adaptable, right? And so put us in any situation and we can adapt to that. And we did, but we also weren't doing the volume recruiting that we had previously been doing because of COVID.
So you had the capacity.
Yeah. And the organization that I was with at the time too, it hit us a little closer to home than some of the other companies across the US. And so there was a lot of action taken very quickly. And then it was a couple months later, it wasn't immediately that the separation happened, but they decided it was time to minimize the workforce.
Sure.
And then probably about 2 months after, not even, like a month and a half after, they realized that they needed a lot of those people back.
It was a wild time.
Because I can't, like, and then going from, I want to say we had probably 75 positions within the organization to 1,200 overnight.
Wow. Wow. And you bring up two really big thoughts for me. One, we talk a lot about accountability on our podcast, personal accountability.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes accountability can be perceived as something negative, where you're taking responsibility for something you did wrong.
Yeah.
But the truth is, when you take accountability for yourself, your career, and your choices, it actually puts you in a position of power with what you're trying to accomplish and where you're trying to go. And in these moments where COVID was such a wild time, right? It was scary for, I think, everybody personally. And then it was very scary professionally because industries were so unstable. You just shared within 2 months, it was letting people go, bringing them back on, letting people go, bringing people back on. And I think you have to look at that and say, did I make the best decision for me with the information I had at that time? And okay, now I'm in a new moment in time. So when you got out of that and you were sharing that now you have a bunch of roles and you're bringing people back, you have to own that piece and go, wait a second. Now I have to step back and say, no, I cannot take any more on. This was a moment in time. And now I need to get back to what's actually moving the dial forward in my realm of responsibility, whether you're an individual contributor or a leader. So I think that's a great example of how sometimes life forces you into that role.
It's funny because during the pandemic, and all of this is starting to come back to me now, because we didn't have a lot of openings, I was supporting the team with tracking who had COVID and like who they came in contact. And I can't remember what it's called, but literally writing down and tracking on a daily basis of like who they came in contact with. Was it anybody in the organization? And so I remember having to say, okay, now we have all these openings. I cannot do this anymore. You all have to take this responsibility back. Sorry, I was happy to help with the interim, but now I have to focus on filling these roles.
On my job.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a key piece. It's very easy for us to forget that this is a contractual relationship.
Right.
That when you sign an offer letter, you agree to accept a certain amount of compensation to complete a certain job function, and your company agrees to pay you and provide you with the necessary resources to get that job done. But because our careers become such a big part of our identity, we start to blur the line sometimes. I think COVID was an extreme example of everybody just jumping in and caring and all of that. And then you step back from that and you go, okay, now things are settling. We're a little bit back to some type of normalcy.
Yeah.
What does that look like for me? And I think it's really important to have those moments of clarity and not, it's a very slippery slope when you start taking on more work that doesn't belong to you.
Yeah.
And then going further and further and further into it without stopping yourself. For me, I'm excited by the challenge of things, and I'm a lifelong learner. So when somebody would come to me and ask me to participate in something that wasn't necessarily my responsibility, I was excited by it. I saw it as an opportunity to grow, where maybe I wouldn't get exposure to this in another company or consulting with another group. And so I'm going to take this on. And then after a while, you might realize that project has exploded. It's a little bit bigger. And you go, did this one really move me forward professionally? Or was I just enticed by what was happening? And I need to stop myself from doing that.
I think that's a good call out too, right? And so as you're taking on, or if you take on additional projects, assessing afterwards how it helped you or deterred you from what your ultimate goals are. Yeah. And if you do that, then you can be more cognizant and aware and accountable to yourself moving forward and taking on different projects, responsibilities, to see if they really are going to help grow your career or if they're going to hold you back.
Right. I know when we were preparing, you were talking about complacency a little bit of why do we as women get stuck in this role of taking on more and more and becoming so indispensable. And I think part of it is, one, the slippery slope. Now you're too deep in it and you feel like you're stuck there. Two might be a little bit of the complacency, if you want to elaborate on that.
Just fine doing what you're doing on a daily basis. Don't want to necessarily ruffle any feathers. Sometimes when you're complacent, you just do what's asked of you because why not, right? You're complacent in what you're doing. There's no reason to object to something coming across your desk. And then I think the other piece is being turned down too, right? Like you're not able to grow your career in the company you're in because the person that is your leader or other leadership, when you've had conversations with them about growing and getting to the next level, they kind of shoot you down.
Yeah.
I have a friend that I had a class with who was told, well, you haven't really earned your place here yet.
After she had taken on all these additional things.
Did more than that person did in the role that they were in.
Wow.
And they were leaving, and she wanted to be promoted to backfill that, and was told, oh, no, you haven't earned it yet. Just because you spent the last 20 years busting your butt in this role and she did more than you did in the last year doesn't mean she hasn't earned it yet.
Yeah.
And so there's that too, right? And at that point, for me, that's when you realize you're not supposed to be there. Now, if this person isn't going to be your boss much longer, maybe you stay and wait to talk to the new person, or you just start looking.
Or, and this is situational.
Yeah.
But you could, and this is where I think personal accountability comes in. I don't know that person's situation, so this is not directed toward them in any way.
Yeah.
But you could look at that and say, did that person self-promote in that role? Did they do a good job of saying quarterly or whatever, here's where I am toward my goals, and show that they were exceeding expectations regularly, so that whether that person was leaving or not, you walk in with tangible evidence of, okay, if somebody says, I don't think you've earned that, say, well, tell me how, because here are my goals that we established at the beginning of the year, and here's where I am toward them. I've already surpassed them, and we're only 6 months into the year. Or each of the 2 years I've been here, I've exceeded each goal by X percentage. And I think it's really important. I will push always on that personal accountability, because nobody else is going to advocate for you. I shouldn't say nobody. Sometimes they do, but you can't count on that. You have to advocate for yourself. And this is a job. This is a contractual relationship.
Yep.
And so, to Rebecca's point, if you're taking on all of these extra things and you're outperforming in your role, then, and somebody doesn't recognize it, you're right, it might be time to pack your bags and leave.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, you do want to assess, did you do a good enough job sharing what you did? And you might think, well, they're my boss, they're supposed to manage it. Okay, there's what's supposed to be and there's what is. And we want to prepare you for what is, right? And so you need to really own that piece too, and look at, are you doing that today and showing this?
Yeah.
And an extension of that, last thing I'll say is, sometimes you get pulled into things because you are highly capable. I'm guilty of this. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, I was pulled in at one point to a number of projects by a senior leader, and they were all top priority. This needs to be your number one priority. And I sat down one day and I was like, I can't do this, which is not something I say.
Yeah.
I do not say I can't do this.
Yeah.
But I was in 26 additional projects outside of everything I was leading in my department. And I was building a department from scratch. And it was on me to sit with my leader and say, I'm in 26 top priority projects that are outside of my realm of responsibility. And that leader was so phenomenal. I remember them saying to me, what? Oh my goodness, I did not catch this. We've got to get you off of these. And they took immediate action to get it down to 3 plus what I had in my department. But they're busy too. We're all human beings. You have to own your role and step up and say, I'm in too much and I can't excel at all of these. And as a high achieving person, I want to be able to deliver for you, but this would be impossible for one person to do.
Yeah. And had you not said anything, you would have just been setting yourself up for failure.
I would drown. And then I might be in that conversation where somebody's saying, hey, these were your 5 goals over here in your department and you didn't hit any of them. And I'm sitting on 26 successful projects that have nothing to do with my department. That I could say, yeah, but look at what I did over here. And I think if you're not having those active conversations, then you could very well find yourself in that position.
Yeah.
Which is not good for your success. And it also becomes very unhealthy for you too.
And then your team suffers too. If you're not able to focus on the goals for the department and the team, but you're focusing on 26 projects outside of your department, your team suffers too, because they're not getting the attention and information that they need from you to be successful.
That's true. Yeah. And I think another thing that we run into as women is we get locked into a position where we become indispensable.
Mm.
And that actually inhibits your growth as well. If you become a person who can get anything done faster, better than other people, they're going to keep you there. Because
and a lot of the time they're going to say they're not ready yet. And that's not the case.
That is true. You'll get the feedback. What Rebecca's mentioning is, oh yeah, you're not ready for that growth. You're not ready for this or that. And the truth is it would take 4+ people to replace you. And we don't have that in the budget for this year. Mm-hmm. So we're not ready yet. And you have to be really cognizant of that. And this goes back to knowing what your role is, knowing what your goals are, and knowing where you're performing against those goals. And if you keep that as your center, you can always come back to that and stop yourself from taking on additional things, or be able to share your measurable impact on the organization to say, here's how I'm performing on the goals that we've discussed.
Yeah.
And by the way, here's how I'm performing on the goals that are even outside of my scope of work. So tell me how I'm not ready specifically. And it arms you a little bit better, I think.
Yeah. I just think about conversations I had with leaders as we were replacing people who left an organization, and the natural backfill would be the person who reported to them. And I vividly remember having these conversations. They're like, well, they're not ready yet. They're not ready. Why aren't they ready? And they could never articulate why they were not ready. But I knew they weren't ready because they didn't want to have to replace them in the role that they were in. They'd rather replace the other person who just left.
Wow. So don't become that person.
Don't be that person.
You have to remind yourself. I think Rebecca and I always like to give you all strategies and things to do to work toward those things. And I highly recommend a quarterly self-check-in. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many of you are like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for a quarterly self-check-in. I already have meetings about meetings, and then I have meetings about the meetings that just happened. This is the case of prioritizing what is really critical to you.
Yeah.
If every quarter you check in with yourself and you look at what are the goals I'm being measured on and how am I performing toward those? What are my personal goals? Am I looking to be promoted this year? Am I looking to move to another role this year? What have I done toward that? And then what are the extra things that are taking up my time that might not be moving the needle?
Yep.
You can then adjust every quarter and you'll find yourself closer to your goals every single time. But if you don't, you might not recognize until you slipped all the way down that slope. And that's a really sticky, really, really sticky place to be.
And I think in addition to that assessment, outline what you're doing that's your role and responsibility contractually. And then also keep a list of things that you're doing that are outside of the scope of what you're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And that way, when people ask you what you're working on, you can speak to it. Because I know in the moment, I'm like, wait, what? Huh? I have to look at my calendar. What am I working on? Right?
Yeah. Because you're working on 111 things.
Exactly. And so it just gives you a better one central location place to be able to identify what is in with your role responsibilities, what's outside of it, but also holding yourself accountable for those things too. And, you know, it is a positive thing. Once you sit down and start listing all the things you're doing, you're like, wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Exactly. Yes. So you don't realize. And I think as women, when we're managing a household or you're managing all of your own home things, and then you're managing all of these business things, you don't realize how much you're doing because it's just inherent in us to just do it. We'll figure it out. We'll get it done. Reese Witherspoon recently came out and she had a really funny line. She said, I can't stand in scripts when they send it to me and it says, and then the woman turned to the man and said, what do we do now? And she was like, never met a woman who turns to a man and says, what do we do now? They're always ahead of the game. And I think because we have that in us that we're like, I know what to do now. We're going to do this. You're going to go do this.
It's just the go.
Before you know it, you've now done that with 26 projects, 111 things, as Rebecca was saying. And so you've got to pause for a moment and check in with yourself because Pause and strategize. That's always my advice to Rebecca. But I think when your career becomes such a big part of your identity, as it is for many ambitious women, then you can lose sight of how what you're working on is actually moving your career forward versus maybe what you're excited about, maybe what you felt compelled to do in a time of need and hardship for people or a company, you can lose sight of that. So I think it's really critical to do those check-ins with yourself and have those goals clearly outlined.
Absolutely. And I guess it's personal note, but I was laid off late last year, and with that layoff, I was lost. I had never been in a position since I was 14 that I was unemployed, not knowing what to do. The job market was shit, especially coming from talent acquisition and then being on the other side of it and dealing with companies and automated rejection emails after applying like 4 hours later. Nobody's looking at my resume that quick.
Right.
Don't lie to me. And so I didn't know who I was or what my identity was, because I had always defined myself by my career and my work. And it took me a while to get out of that and navigate my way out. And once I did, and going back to school and having additional conversations and hearing about different leadership styles and all the things, I realized what my path needed to be.
Right.
But it wasn't easy at first.
No.
It was deflating.
And I think that goes back to two things we were talking about earlier. One is having that external network, so that when things like that happen, you have that external network to lean on to help you formulate your vision, right? To have these outside perspectives to say, well, we know you beyond your career. We know you beyond that company. We know you beyond these achievements that you've had. And I think leaning into that or finding them is critical. And if you keep that while you're in your role, again, you're not now reacting when you're already in a stressful state. I think something else you pointed out is you can only be indispensable at a company to a certain point, because life happens. Companies will go up and down, and they have to make decisions that are best for the company. And sometimes that means laying off really good people, really productive people that were once indispensable. And so you need to make sure that for you, everything you're doing is lifting you at the same time it's lifting the company. So are you being developed? Are you learning new skills? Or are you planning the office holiday party, right? Because that's not really a transferable skill. So I think making sure that whatever extra work you take on is mutually beneficial.
Absolutely.
In that work environment too. And don't be too hard on yourself if you find yourself in a position like Rebecca did, where you've done all these things, you've been working hard, your career is a big part of your identity, and now you find yourself lost. I don't want to define that for you, but
I didn't know who I was. Without work and a career, I didn't know who I was, because I had one for 30 plus years, right? And that's such an odd place to be in. And I told some of my friends at the time, like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am without a job.
Right.
And so that was a lot of self-reflection that had to be done too.
That's such a great, I just want to let that marinate for a second, because I think that's another reason that women take on more and more and more, right? If it is a big part of your identity, and maybe your self-worth, you keep taking on more and more and more that's outside of what will move you up, because it fills you in some sort of way. And that's great if it fills you, but in the real world of things, or the external world, I should say, instead of the real world, it also needs to move you forward. Or at any point, any of us can find ourselves in the position that you were in.
Right.
And if you take these incremental steps along the way to protect yourself or put some guardrails on you, you'll have an easier time navigating a hardship like Rebecca's describing, or just your next step in your career and where you're trying to go. So I think if this hit you today, it's a very real issue a lot of women are facing. We'd love to hear about your experiences. We talked about a broad spectrum of where you may be on this chart, whether you're identity driven with your career, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're somebody who's just intrigued by additional things and excited. Wherever you fall on the spectrum, we would love to hear from you and your journey there. And then if you know someone who might be in the spot that Rebecca was in, or I was, or where you found yourself or heard yourself in this episode, go ahead and share this podcast with them too. We'd love to have them join in the conversation.
Follow us on all your socials, NFNA Podcast. Until next time.